Rosie and I, on behalf of our colleagues in the Natural Capital Initiative, would like to say a few words about natural capital and the Natural Capital Initiative. A few words about the development of the concept, looking back and looking forward, and a few words about the initiative itself. Looking back to the first summit and some of the key messages that came out of that, and looking and linking those to the aims of this particular meeting. Natural capital and human well-being, the link between those has really been put in the spotlight with the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, and now the concept of natural capital. I guess it was the Convention on Biological Diversity that put biodiversity in the spotlight, and the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment that put ecosystem services and biodiversity together in the spotlight, and together have led to the provenance of the concept of natural capital. Of course, the concept has been around for a long time, and in preparing these and in looking back and looking for references and on ecosystem services and natural capital, I was rather surprised to see that, contrary to my expectations, which would be that there would be a rise in publications in ecosystem services and then on natural capital, that publications in both were relatively the same in number over the last 25 or so years. But what's different is if you look back to the 1990s, you see natural capital written about in terms of sustainable development. Move forward and you see two things. You see what Georgina Mace referred to over coffee a minute ago as this starburst of interest in the area. And you see it's linked to ecosystem services. So these, I should have said, are a couple of word clouds, the word clouds of highly cited papers on natural capital with the word natural capital removed. Looking back to the first summit, and this the picture on the right there is a poster which highlights the key messages from that summit. I've pulled out just 4 of those. I only want to dwell on one, but point out that the relevance of natural capital is to policymakers and planners, business leaders, researchers, communicators, and educators. It's a very, very broad relevance. And just to perhaps highlight the first, to improve integration of the improvement of integration of science and policy across all sectors is necessary. And we'll see some examples, I think, in a minute of how that has happened. And I'm going to come back to those at the end of the talk. The landscape is huge, from research, private sector and business, public sector, and the broader NGO and others in the community. This is a slide I didn't prepare. Rosie tells me that Ian Bateman produced much of this. I've put one logo in there. It was kind of difficult to find space for it. So there's a huge amount of activity in the area. One example that's worth highlighting in this broad area of natural capital is the UK National Ecosystem Assessment. Certainly the most comprehensive sub-global ecosystem assessment to date. Large and very heavy, but a model for ecosystem assessments elsewhere. It highlighted status and trends in ecosystem services, and to take one figure from it shows by bringing the expertise of more than 500 people together, you can get some idea of status and trends and huge range of ecosystem services across the UK's broad habitats. In a way, this is significant as a UK assessment. Of course, it's rather similar to the global ecosystem Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. What maybe stands out is the way that values came to prominence and were highlighted in the UK National Ecosystem Assessment. Not just monetary financial values, but this broad range of values which relate to natural capital. And if you haven't had a look at yesterday's Nature, there's a lovely article about conservation and the need to embrace a diversity of points of views and values. The National Ecosystem Assessment is significant in its adoption into policy, both in England in the Natural Environment White Paper, in Scotland, and in Wales. Turning briefly to Europe, you can see natural capital highlighted there too. The EU Biodiversity 2020 strategy, published in about 2010, I think it tends to be known as the biodiversity strategy, and what's overlooked is the long title, Our Life Insurance, Our Natural Capital, EU Biodiversity Strategy to 2020, and starts with those words, biodiversity is our natural capital, delivering ecosystem services to underpin our economy. And we can see the same prominence of natural capital now in Europe through the 7th EU Environment Action Programme, published this year, with its first priority objective to protect, conserve and enhance the Union's natural capital. Going back to the Natural Environment White Paper, what's significant about that, I guess, is that it both pulls together protecting and improving our natural environment and growing a green economy. It has a large number of commitments, two of which we'll highlight because of their relevance to natural capital and the Natural Capital Initiative. The first is the Ecosystems Knowledge Network, important in part because of the role that the Natural Capital Initiative played in establishing it, but also important because of its relevance to practitioners, providing a resource for anybody who wants to share knowledge or learn about ecosystems approach. It is a membership of over 1,000, I believe, and you can see from the map the members go right across the UK. So its activities very much focus on practitioners. Second example is the Natural Capital Committee, another white paper commitment established by the government with aims including advising the government on how it should prioritise action on natural capital and also advise on research priorities for the natural capital area. I won't say anything more about it, other than to highlight the production of the 25-year plan, and I believe there will be a session on this tomorrow. The activities of the committee will relate to research, and I'll just highlight a few examples of relevant research. It's perhaps wrong to highlight them in relation to individual research councils because so much of this activity is joint across research councils and funders, and that's perhaps one of its greatest strengths. For NERC-led initiatives, these include the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service Sustainability Programme, BESS, which has been going for a few years, and the recently established Valuing Nature Programme, which builds on the Valuing Nature Network. From the Economic and Social Research Council, Nexus Network, and activities under SEER are relevant to natural capital. And there's a long list from BBRC as well, including the Insect Pollinators Initiative and the Tree Health and Plant Biosecurity Initiative. And from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, activities include supporting the NEA follow-up work. Rosie pulled out 4 challenges, and there clearly are many challenges or concerns, as was expressed a minute ago. And the first being setting targets for benefits derived from natural capital. And the second, facilitating the underpinning interdisciplinary science that links natural capital with values. So I put this word cloud back in here, not just to break up the text, but because I think it not only highlights the importance of interdisciplinary approaches, but it goes the other way, that interdisciplinary progress has benefited from the natural capital concept. It's required for it. And you can perhaps see in the word cloud the growth of multidisciplinary, certainly, and probably interdisciplinary science in this area. The third challenge was implementing new financial mechanisms to enable externalities to be internalized. I'm going to come back to that one in a minute. And the final one, linking local scale action to national scale strategy. That's clearly important, because with this proliferation of activities, there's a danger that they become dispersed and aren't linked together. So quite rightly, we see that specialization. The ecosystems knowledge network focuses on practitioners, specializes in that. The National Capital Committee relates to national scale strategy, but these need to be linked up. I guess that's one of the main purposes of the Natural Capital Initiative Summits, is to bring all these threads together. So I'm going to briefly go back to those key messages that I pulled out of the first summit and look at those very briefly. So the first was for policymakers and planners to improve integration of science and policy across all sectors. I think that, like many of these messages, they weren't just for policymakers and planners, and this is clearly a message for everybody, and it links clearly to the first of the 5 aims of this summit, to derive a common understanding of what natural capital really means. The second message that we pulled out was for business leaders. Consumers and others deserve better resource management, and businesses should not be reluctant to take the initiative. So that links to the second aim of this summit, to find and demonstrate ways in which sectors and initiatives can work and are working together to apply the natural capital concept. The third message that I pulled out was to researchers who occasionally have this tendency to do research for its own sake. And the message back then was that new tools must be developed to include ecosystem services in decision making. So policy making, decision making relevant research, which links clearly to the third aim of this summit, to identify ways of ensuring that practical responses have scientific rigor. So the last recommendation that we pulled out was for communicators and educators. Again, I think this is for everybody, that we need a new, more accessible language to talk about our natural capital. And I very much thought about this when I was reading the bit about externalities. So the relevant aim for this meeting is to understand in plain language the natural and social science behind the natural capital concept. And finally, the final aim of this meeting is to communicate recommendations for ways forward across all sectors, which isn't clearly an aim for any individual sector, any individual group in this audience, but for all of us. So Rosie would like to thank colleagues in the Natural Capital Committee and in the Ecosystems Knowledge Network, and thank you all for listening.